Welcome to the Bend Don't Break podcast. We are powered by The Source Weekly, Bend's locally owned newspaper. This podcast is our eddy in the rushing waters of local journalism. We are glad that you're taking some of your time to listen to us chat with the people who shape our local community.
Thank you to our presenting sponsor, RE/MAX Key Properties, a family-owned full-service real estate brokerage specializing in residential, luxury, commercial, new construction, and ranch and land properties. Their new state-of-the-art facility at 42 Greenwood Avenue is a modern, collaborative space and the new home of the Bend Don't Break podcast recording studio.
I am Aaron Switzer, the producer of this podcast and publisher of The Source Weekly. Today we have with us award-winning author and poet Ellen Waterston. She has published 4 poetry and 4 literary nonfiction titles, including most recently, We Could Die Doing This, which we're going to talk more about in the podcast, and Walking the High Desert. She is founder of The Writing Ranch, which since 2000 has conducted workshops for established and emerging writers, and of the annual Waterston Desert Writing Prize, established in 2015 and adopted in 2019 as a program of the High Desert Museum. In 2024, she was appointed to a 2-year term as the 11th Oregon Poet Laureate and awarded both the Literary Arts of Portland Stuart H. Holbrook and Soapstone Bread and Roses Awards, recognizing her work as an author and advocate for the literary arts. Based in Central Oregon, she serves on the guest faculty of OSU-Cascades MFA in creative writing. Ellen is completing currently a 5th collection of poetry. And for those who are watching, this is the latest book right here. We Could Die Doing This. I have a sponsor before we jump out. Crux has generously stepped forward to help support this podcast. They are our favorite spot for craft brews with mountain views. Little poetry there.
Exactly. I approve.
Right?
Nobody rhymes anymore.
That's right. Ellen, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
And doing this. So, it's been kind of a whirlwind. You became the Poet Laureate at the time you were finishing up this collection of work.
Absolutely. It's been a whirlwind. I just want to say, though, that it's a huge, well, both are a huge honor, both to work with The Source on the column over the last 3 years and then to collaborate on this collection. I'm really delighted. And in addition, I'm hugely honored to have been appointed the Poet Laureate and grateful to Governor Tina Kotek and Oregon Arts Commission, Oregon Humanities, Oregon Cultural Trust, all of the arts organizations that help support it financially and administer it. So it's, who knew?
Yeah. Tell me a little, I'm curious how one becomes the Oregon Poet Laureate. I know it's, like you said, there's a lot of organizations that are involved in it, and it is quite the honor. So how do you if you're one of many poets out there listening to this, how do they ascend?
Well, it's a 2-year term, so a little in advance of whatever that puts us. There will be some general statewide announcement that there is a search. Yeah. And one has to be sort of nominated by anybody. Right. Anybody. Yeah. And that goes to the Oregon Cultural Trust, as far as I know. And if that nominee is, quote, approved or vetted as to exist and having maybe written a poem, then those approved nominees are invited to submit an application that's pretty long and complicated. And that is submitted, a group of 20 that's made up of arts organizations, past Poets Laureate, others, get together and submit roughly 3 or so candidates to the governor. Oh. And the governor makes the selection. That's the current process. That's the process that I was involved in. Prior to that, which makes you understand why they installed this new process, it was sort of this crazy lobbying, people all getting thousands of people to send in support letters to the governor. And also, in some instances, the governor has, not this governor, but past governors have chosen to circumvent the process and just flat appoint somebody.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's a system that isn't a system.
Or it's evolving.
Or
Yes, somewhat. I mean, I can imagine if I was elected governor and someone came to me and said, "Here's your process." People are just all the poets in the state are just going to start sending you poetry. I might appoint.
a different way of doing it.
Yeah, I
Well,
might,
yeah, no,
I
but
might
they're
just select somebody.
they're spared of that now.
right.
That can't happen now.
Right.
It's going through a
Yeah.
number of sort of filters prior to the governor getting the names.
But you got to do right off the bat. You've got to do some pretty cool things. What are some of the more governmental slash artistic things that happen with this position?
Well, I mean, what's been fun and good for my poetry is being asked to write original poems for various larger events. The Oregon Leadership Summit took place in Portland and at the end of the year or just into this year. Recently, I opened both the Senate and the 83rd Legislative Session in Salem. Not yet in the rotunda. It's still under construction. And will soon be reading an original poem at the dedication of Neighbor Impact's new food warehouse and in conjunction with their 40th anniversary. So it's those kinds of things that are real challenges in terms of writing a poem, keeping it close to the bone, and not getting too anthem-y. That's what I'm finding the challenge.
Well, I got to imagine if you're standing there in this august body, it wants to pull your language up into something like an anthem, like, oh, this is a big moment.
Yeah, exactly. And you can get in a lot of trouble, I think, doing that. Actually, you can get in a lot of trouble if you keep it close to the bone as well. So I'm hoping, so far, I haven't been shown the door before the poem was completed.
Joel, you said in the when we talked just before you were going to do those, that you were going to cajole push them a little bit with the poem. Did that happen? Did you?
I did.
Yeah. What was your line? Do you remember the line that you gave to them?
I mean, I want to sort of frame this by saying I bring the desert in most of what I'm reading when it's possible.
Yeah.
I weave the desert in somehow. But in the poem to the legislature, within that sort of desert scape, I had a line about us citizens need you to know. Need you to know that you know what you don't know.
Right.
And to know what you do. And that last can mean what you're doing or what you do know.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, there was that.
Yeah.
There was that. But it was broadly, it was an invitation to everybody.
Sure.
And we do need that
Yeah.
as the citizens of Oregon.
Well, I thought about it after you had told me, and I was thinking about this role, and I think I remember initially when the Poet Laureate was kind of, oh no, that was the one with the city. But it does make sense that you have, it's an important position. It's important that into these proceedings, there is somebody from the artistic community who can step in and remind them of things like that, in all of the function and rule making and gavel hammering, that there are people out there, and I think a poet's probably one of the best ways to poke that in there.
I think it's an amazing program and project and position, because really for the governor too, somebody is running around the state and hopefully spreading goodwill and spreading this sort of message that words matter.
Yeah.
What we say matters. How we say them matters. So I think I really have been an advocate for this program forever, and could not have been more surprised to get this position. But I see the appetite with a poet laureate from this side of the mountains. The appetite for my visiting is big.
Yeah.
Big. I mean, I'll be you have an old horse I could borrow that won't buck? I've been invited to the Crooked River Roundup. I'm dying to get an enormous flag,
Yeah.
the oldest cowgirl in the parade,
Yeah.
with a flag that
Do
says
ya?
Poet Laureate.
Do the Miss Rodeo
Wait,
laureate, put the banner on,
Yeah.
do the,
Totally.
I love that. Yeah.
I haven't found the horse yet, so.
Do you get, do you, I mean, when you talk about bringing the desert to, I love that because you're bringing it to the Willamette Valley. You're going over to this very lush area with people who are like, what is sand? If we're not going to the coast, then what are you talking about? I mean, do you find, I, I mean, it's a fine point. Maybe I'm just full of nonsense, but it seems like that would be a thing. Like they're hearing words they haven't really heard before.
Well, it's true. I just did a reading for the Salem Poetry Project. And after my presentation reading, it's a wonderful organization run by Mark Jacobson. Is that right? Mark, forgive me if I just got your last name wrong. But the poems in the open mic that followed, there was a lot of moss.
Right. Yeah, that's what I imagine.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of bubbling brooks and
Yeah.
towering trees and
Yeah. So, yeah, it's fun to bring a little scent of sage.
yeah. Yeah, I love it. And for them, I mean, Central Oregon has had, somewhat being the other from the valley over its evolution. Ben's ascendancy and growth has certainly raised our profile, but it was always, it's on the other side of the mountains. And we kind of feel the same way a little bit about the valley. So
Well, as you know, my love is
further east.
further out,
Right.
south and east, and I think that poem that accompanied one of my columns in the Source was static. It took place way southeastern Oregon.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's great to bring attention to it. I think it's daunting enough that it's not going to be overrun anytime soon, although it's definitely being used more. Let's just say it's being found by the recreational community.
Yeah.
But hopefully that'll be a good thing for it.
Well, people all over the state are now struggling to say the word Oahe now that it's up for designation and its profile's being raised, and that's one of the most remote places out there.
And it's our own Grand Canyon.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place. I want to shift focus a little bit to your book because I know it's out,
Yes.
but not fully out. We're right in the germination stage of its distribution.
Yes, the book itself is finished.
Yeah.
And these great boxes of books are arriving in about 4 days. And there are some bookstores in town eagerly awaiting some copies. And I'm curious to see what happens. I mean, it's as you're probably aware, all of you out there in radio land, blog land, whatever we're doing here, TV land.
Vlog, pod.
Vlog.
Yeah.
Sounds like indigestion. But anyhow, it's a collection of 3 years worth of essays that I've been writing every month for the Source. And the sort of germination of the idea, I had the idea, suddenly startled to see what birthday I just celebrated. And it occurred to me that it might be worth musing about it. And I'm really happy that you were willing to take a flyer. And the title of the book, We Could Die Doing This, is kind of a koan almost. I mean, and we will, actually. Every single one of us.
The answer to it
This
is...
book is not limited
right.
to gray hairs. I just
Right.
want you to know.
Yeah.
And so, and I have to credit you, Aaron, because I brought you that long list of possible titles. And we went over it very, very seriously over a cup of coffee. And then nothing seemed to be really catching on. And so I related to you the story of how my children, whenever they would lead me off on some adventure and I'd be terrified in the back seat and I'd say, we could die doing this. And so They've never let me forget that. And
Right.
I mentioned it to you, and you said, that's it. That's the title. So there you have it.
Right. Yeah, I remember somewhat keenly when you proposed the concept of the column. And we were, newspapers are always at a point where they're trying to young down their audiences. They're always trying to go, how can we get more on TikTok and reach these younger people who don't read? And and so the concept of us publishing something that was going in the other direction and going to appeal to these older readers was something we actually had to have a discussion about. And I thought, this is the height of ageism right here, as we are like parsing out what content certain people wanted. And I think we all kind of came to that same realization within our offices. And we're just like, we're definitely doing this column,
Well, I hope it wasn't only because you wanted to be
Oh,
politically correct.
no, it
And-
was because we knew it was going to be a good column. The only thing holding it up was, was there going to be an audience for the piece? And
As it turns out,
No,
they
it's-
aren't all old.
no, and that's what I mean. You're gonna find something relevant regardless of your age in there.
Yeah, it's true. If not, you'll find reason not to age. But if you figure that out, let me know.
Yeah, you'll be answering the question whether you could die doing this or not.
Yeah. And I now realize that 3 years ago, I was sort of cavalier about the notion of aging. And now 3 years later, I'm like, this is
Yeah.
serious.
Yeah.
It's really happening. Oh, this is no bedtime story. Well, it is a bedtime. Oh, well, never mind. Don't go there. We'll just.
Well, the timing of the pitch was keen too, because my mother had also at the time been talking to me about these slights and prejudices that she was encountering, and we had been talking about it in typical my mom. She was furious, she was not taking it lying down, and so I would get the blow by blow when these things happened, and so I was like very eager to see what you were going to produce.
It is very surprising how much ageism is happening.
Yeah.
I mean, it just is. And I think people of a certain age really need to pay attention, because the culture is trying to tell you to get lost,
Yes.
get out of the way, go away, don't be involved. Or if you are going to be involved, make sure that everybody else with you in that effort looks just like you, same age. Yeah. And so, it's kind of a cheerleading effort to keep us all engaged and as much as we can, just sloughing off that attitude. I'm not sure. I mean, culturally, it's pretty unique to this country,
Right.
the extent to which it exists.
Yeah, I'm not encouraged that it's the worm is turning at all. I don't get the sense that there's a up and coming reverence for the old in our culture. Increasingly it looks like segmentation.
It does, although, there are encouraging signs here and there, such as the parts for older people in movies and whatnot.
right.
And I don't know if there'll be some major sea change, but, so long as Jane Fonda is out there reinventing herself every decade, there's hope.
Right. Yeah. From your book, what is your or in writing the book, what's your favorite thing that's come out of the process?
Well, I have a profound appreciation for fitting anything into 800 words or less.
Right.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's really been a wonderful exercise.
Yeah.
Working with a deadline has been a very healthy thing. But I do think too that there's something kind of meditative about aging. I don't care what your persuasion is, what your background is, what your economy is. It becomes a kind of reflective time of life, and so it's been a lot of fun to put my ear to that shell
Yeah.
and see what I hear. I think some of the columns that I favor are examples of that, like Ribbit or Black Ice. Those are two that I particularly love. That it's not these columns don't all sort of tell you how best to get rid of your arthritic knee. It's not so much that as how to think about,
Right.
how to
Yes.
think beyond the
Right.
arthritic knee.
Right. So I imagine you've got a pretty busy schedule with the Oregon Poet Laureate stuff. What is on the horizon for you at this point? We were just talking about how this is a good fusion. You're going to be able to go on a book tour in the capacity as the Oregon Poet Laureate. They kind of come together.
Okay.
They kind of come together. What does the future hold for you? Getting this nomination, it has had to have this rousting, I imagine that had you thought about what you were going to be doing in 2025, it wouldn't have been involved traipsing around the state.
No, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And I'm not one to sort of go halfway on anything. And so I think I've already satisfied the official requirements of the number of visits in the 2 years. I think I've exceeded that already. But it's because the appetite, as I say, is really thrilling.
Yeah.
And really perhaps one of the most moving experiences I've had was doing some workshops at the Youth Challenge program east of town. And some of the poems that emerged from these pretty quick sessions, right?
Yeah.
Not a lot of time to think about it, but just such a yearning to express that way.
Yeah.
And to be greeted with a young cadet standing up and saying, "Do I have permission to speak, ma'am?" "Yes, you do." "Ma'am, yes, go ahead." "Ma'am, could you help me write a love poem?" So
that is
sweet.
so great. Yeah.
So that kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
But to answer your question, what's ahead? I do actually have a February that's pretty light-ish. In terms of Poet Laureate, because I'll be running the 14th annual writing retreat that I do on the Baja in February. But March and April are insane because April's Poetry Month. So I will be everywhere.
Oh, great.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
I'm learning to batch it. So in March, I'll be doing Union and Wallowa counties.
Okay. Yeah.
And some of it's more formal and some of it's little classrooms and little tiny places. I'll be doing the same thing in April. I'll be a week plus in Harney County with the Migratory Bird Festival and at the Wildlife Refuge and with the Harney County Writers Guild and all of it all together at once. So that makes it more efficient. I'm really now getting smarter. A few round trips to the Valley in 1 week, you realize it'd be a good idea to try to consolidate some of this.
Well, it's a great opportunity to meet and pull together and to form this kind of network that, it's still, I could be wrong and forgive me if I am, but I don't think these groups are that well connected. The groups in Wallowa and Harney, the groups over in Salem, Grants Pass. You're going to be somewhat of a filament going through them, connecting them as you go around, because who else is making these tours? Books in their current state, writers, they don't have those opportunities anymore.
No. And to that point, Aaron, actually, it's wonderful you touch on that. I've been struggling for a project within this. I had an idea about the poetry box. So they're like the little free public libraries on, and I thought, oh, great, I'll run around with 500 of those in my car. And I thought, no, they'll all turn into bird feeders and nobody will really want them. And then I thought, oh, no, I know what I'll do. I'll do online, a web page, poetry, right? And every leaf, if you click on it, a poem emerges that's been written by some of the people I've visited. I want to showcase the people I'm coming into contact with. And one of my children said, you know what? Every single elementary school teacher does a poetry bulletin board.
You're the grand teacher.
So that idea kind of went south. But now I really want to do what I'm most comfortable with which is creating both an online and a hard copy version of an anthology, including the writings of all the locations I've come into, all the people,
right.
whether it's in Cottage Grove, whether it's Youth Challenge, whatever it is,
Right.
and have it sort of a north, south, east, west. Speaking of filament, maybe that's the title. You're really good at titles.
I do brands pretty well. We do these things. So behind us are all my little brands. So, yeah, I love that idea. I think it would be, I know you have enough on your plate, but getting them to all come together at some point physically,
Yep.
which is, I know verboten in this day and age, but people, not just on a social media page or, but come have them speak, have them do their various poetries. The Moss people can get together with the cattle people, etc. So
Yeah.
yeah, it would be
No,
awesome.
it would really, and I know what it is for a young person to see something printed on a page. I don't care how much they do online.
Right.
It's just different.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you got your work carved out for you for the for the next several years. You're gonna be setting a pretty rough precedent for the next poet laureate.
Well, I don't know. I will say all of my predecessors, I mean, it didn't really know what it was at first. So William Stafford was the poet laureate for 15 years, and there was no official capacity, no compensation of any kind. And he'd show up every so often and as poet laureate.
Right.
But since then, it's gotten a little more formalized. And in some cases, poets laureate are reappointed. So Paul Ann Peterson visited all 36 counties over 4 years.
Wow.
Kim Stafford is perhaps the most generous human being on the planet in terms of everything, but also in sharing poetry. He lives and breathes it. So it's in his DNA after all.
Yeah.
So no, and Ani Smoke Johnny, who I follow.
Yeah.
It could not be more of a whiplash, right?
Right.
A spoken word slam poet, man of color, young,
Yeah.
wears a ski hat, throwing poems out the window in Portland. And then here we are on the east side of the Cascades with a woman of a certain age. But part of my goal, wherever I go, is to meet with youth and elders, both, so that this anthology, the more I talk about it, now I'm going to have to do it. I want to have both those voices side by side from all of these locations.
Yeah, great. Ellen, we're at the end of our podcast time. Is there anything that you want to touch on that we have not touched on?
No, I don't think so, except that this is not a paid political announcement, but I hope all readers of The Source and news weeklies understand the importance of independent newspapers and support them.
Yeah.
Support them. It's very, very important.
If you would like to support this podcast and the paper, you can go to our homepage and become a member. And it goes to doing really cool things like this. Can talk to Ellie. Again, her book, let me hold it up. We Could Die Doing This. Will be available on her site, ellenwaterston.org.
Or Writing Ranch.
Writingranch.org.
No, it's a com.
Oh, it's a com? Writingranch.com. Or you can also buy a copy in person in the Source. Just come in the office. I swear we don't bite. And you can pick one up there. Thanks for coming in today.
Thank you. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Bend Don't Break podcast, powered by The Source Weekly. To read, hear, and see more of what we do, go to bensource.com.